yet very, very, very powerful. The prodigal son is one of my favorite texts. I will say that Luke 15 is my favorite chapter in the whole Bible, because it gives us a picture of the heart of God. It gives us a picture of His intense love for us. His intense love for those who are lost. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we need to hold dear to our hearts. It's something that we need to grasp and hold on to every day that we walk the face of this earth. And there's so many lessons, and I've preached the prodigal son so many times, but there's so much here. I think you could preach on this probably for the rest of your life and not hit the same thing twice. And that is the depth of the Word of God. When you look at what's there and you begin to study and you just sit and you read and you pray, there's so many things that's there that comes alive from this text. It is not merely a book. It is alive if you sit and you study and desire to know. This morning we're going to contrast two things. We're going to contrast the son who left, the prodigal, and we're going to contrast the good son. So we have two things this morning. We have the son who left, the prodigal, and we have the good son. And we're going to focus on the differences in their relationship with the father. And pay great attention here. Now, some foundation for this text. It begins with Jesus in front of the Pharisees, and the Pharisees accusing Jesus Christ of not being the Son of God because he went out and he spent time with sinners and tax collectors. And at this time, it was their teachings that God hated sinners and rejoiced when they died and left the face of the earth. And these three parables are in reply to that statement by the Pharisees. First, we start with the prodigal. We see that he wakes up one day and says, hey, I want out of here. I want what is due to me for my inheritance when you die. I want it now. I want to leave. And his father gives it to him. And the son takes that inheritance. And he goes out into the world and he blows his inheritance with living that his father would not approve of. He sinned against his father. He sinned against heaven in the things that he does. And he ends up being a servant, a hired man for someone out in the world. And he becomes a pig feeder, basically. And he was so not well taken care of that he desired to eat the same slop that the pigs were eating. So he hits rock bottom. He's in a very, very low place. And he comes back to his senses and he realizes that the servants of his father's house has much more greater than he could possibly dream of at this point. He has nothing. He's hungry. There's a great famine in the land. He just desires to eat. He's so hungry, he wants to slop with the pigs. So he devises a plan to go back to his father. And he says, I'm just going to go back to my father and admit to him that I'm wrong, that I've sinned against him, and beg him to just let me work for him. So we see a mindset of a son that has ran from his father, who basically said, I wish you was dead. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Give me my inheritance. I'm out of here. And he takes that inheritance and just blows it. And comes to rock bottom, to a place to where he has nothing, and he devises this plan. And the plan is based on works, I think. The son thinks that he can go back and be a servant to his father. And maybe even somewhere in the distance, I think immediately he was starving and he was hungry, and he knew that as a servant of his father, that would be provided for, that he would have food to eat. But I think somewhere inside of him still, he maybe wanted to get into the good graces of his father by his works. That he could show his father maybe that he had changed, that he's different. So he jumps up and he takes off. And as he's coming down the road, the father sees him far off. And he's got this plan. I just want to be a servant. I just want to be a servant so I can eat. I don't deserve to be a son, but I want to be a servant. I want to be in the presence of my father, and I want him to provide for me. His father sees him a long way off. Here comes this son who has done all these things and sinned greatly against him. Basically wished death upon his father and took all that was due to him and just blew it in a lifestyle that his father didn't agree with. So you can imagine some of the feelings that he had as he walked that road and the thoughts that he had, whether he would be accepted by his father as a servant or whether his father would banish him off, how he would feel about what he had done to him. But much to his surprise, when he sees his father runs to him. And he throws his arms around him. And he says, "Father, I have sinned. I have sinned in your sight. I have sinned against you, and I have sinned against heaven." And at that point is to where he makes his speech, his plea to be a hired servant. This is the plan he had worked up. But his father won't allow it. His father tells the servants, "Kill the fatted calf. We're going to party." And he immediately, you see by the sandals and the ring and the robe, he takes this son who had left and who had sinned against him, and he replaces him to his position as his son. There was no chance for this man, this son, to work his way back into his father's good graces. There was no ploy for him to be a servant. The father immediately accepted him back as his son. This is an extreme example of love. Fatherly love. Agape love. Godly love. No matter, or it did not matter that the son had sinned against his father, that he had ruined his inheritance. His works were not an issue when he returned. His works were not an issue. The good and the bad things that he had done was not an issue. The issue was his father's love. And the father's love trumped all things. It trumped all works, good and bad. Because he was his son, because he came back and he threw himself upon his father's mercy, he accepted him back. He forgave him immediately and restored him to his place as his son, even though this son had forfeited that right by his actions, by his works. The focus in the first part of this, with the son, the prodigal, is how great the father's love is. That nothing that this son did separated him from his father's love. And then we go to the good son. This is our contrast. So we have the prodigal, now to the good. The good son, I imagine, was very upset at the time when his brother had done what he'd done and left. And I'm sure he grew even more upset at his brother's works. That he went off into the world, that he blew the entire inheritance, that he lived horribly and sinned greatly against his father. And this angered him. It angered him so much that when his brother returned, he was angry at his father because his father accepted him back. When he comes in from the field and working and he comes to the servant, he says, "What's going on?" He says, "Your brother that was lost is found, and we're partying. We're celebrating. We're celebrating his return. He was lost and he's found. He was dead and he's alive. He's back and we're excited. And your father's